when her ring reflected another man. I noticed it first in the mirror because mirrors don't have a reason to lie. Lena was fastening her earring, tilting her head the way she does when she wants a little more light to love her. The diamond of her wedding ring flashed as her fingers moved, and in that quick strobe I saw another flash, warm amber, not the cold white of our bedroom lamps. Candlelight, a reflection living inside the ring that didn't belong to our house. I told myself it was a trick of the window, the city throwing sparks through glass, but the city's light is blue and tired. This was the color of a secret. She caught me looking. "Do I look late?" she asked with a smile, which was funny because she was already 20 minutes past whatever the gallery had planned for its donors. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, crisp and neat, like it had been trained. Her perfume wasn't the one that lives on our dresser. It was something new, peach-skinned and reckless, the kind that says tonight will be remembered by the linens. "Donors don't arrive on time," I said, and I smoothed the collar of her black dress with the authority of a husband who still knows where fabric should fall on the woman he loves. She kissed my cheek, quick as a signature. "You're the best," she said, and left the room smelling like a decision. I watered the pothos plant that hangs by the window and pretended it mattered. When the apartment went quiet, I looked in the mirror again like I could rewind light. I saw only my own face, maybe a year older than yesterday, maybe 5. I'm a furniture designer by trade and a faithful man by habit. The two have the same muscle in them, patience for things that take shape slowly. The text came 40 minutes later, "Wish you were here." It had a blurred photo attached, the kind you take for the idea of it rather than the detail. A split second of clinking glasses, a sliver of Lena's shoulder, a smear of gold that might have been a chandelier, might have been anything. I zoomed in anyway. In the blur, a hand rested on a woman's lower back. It could have been anyone's back, and yet I knew the angle of Lena's spine like a melody you don't remember learning. I closed the photo and stared at the black screen and my own faint reflection on it, doubled by night. The Harbor Muse Gallery sits on a corner where the wind decides what you're wearing. Outside, the line was all velvet rope and small talk. I'm not a guest list guy, but I build their pedestals sometimes, so I knew where the caterer's door lives. Inside, glitter talked to money and everyone pretended to be above it. I kept my eyes at shoulder height, where you can learn a person faster. On the far wall, in front of a canvas the size of a promise, stood Lena and a man in a midnight suit. I'd seen him before only in the way one sees a name in a donor letter. Matteo Varga, painter, collector, rumored saint of poor timing. Raw-boned handsome in that European way that doesn't require gym memberships or apologies. He leaned in and Lena did the thing she does when she's flattered. Her left shoulder rises a centimeter, a punctuation mark her body learned before speech. She placed her palm on the small of his back, 1 second, too, and took it away the way you remove a hand from a sleeping animal, careful, wanting to leave warmth behind. I could have left. I could have let the mirror keep the secret. Instead, a woman I didn't know stepped to my side with the certainty of someone who'd chosen me from a menu. Her hair was pinned in a way that begged for the pins to be found later. She wore a camera, which in a gallery is both uniform and shield. "You don't belong to this conversation," she said, nodding toward Lena and Matteo, "but it belongs to you." I turned. Up close, her eyes were the color of inconvenient truth. "I'm Evan," I said, because my name felt like the only tool I'd brought. "Tessa," she said, and her hand found my elbow as if we'd rehearsed it. "I shoot the shows. I also happen to be the fiancé of the man in the midnight suit who isn't supposed to lean that close to anyone." We stood together like conspirators who hadn't yet agreed on the crime. "Fiancé," I repeated, my mouth discovering how that word tastes when you chew it for someone else. 2 months, which is long enough for a gallery to change the lighting plan 3 times and short enough to make a vow feel like a magic trick. She lifted the camera and took a picture of something far away and safe. How long have you and Lena been married? 8 years, I said, which is long enough to know when a perfume is new. Tessa lowered the camera. Her smile didn't come easy, which made it feel earned when it arrived. Do you want proof, she asked, or do you want oxygen? Both, I said. She led me through side corridors where paint smells like principled arguments and into a storage room where frames leaned against walls like spine-strong soldiers. The air was cooler. A single bulb hung from a chain and gave every edge a halo. She took her phone from the pocket of her jacket and scrolled with the purpose of a person choosing which bone to break. He's clever, she said. He keeps the messages sweet and untraceable, but he loves reflections. He thinks they're romantic. He sends photos of her reflected in windows, of their hands reflected in glass. He thinks I won't recognize her because reflections blur. He forgets I'm a photographer. She handed me the phone. The photo was nothing, and then it wasn't. Two hands not touching on a bar top, their almost touch reflected in the polished wood like a dare already accepted. One hand was Lena's. Her ring shone like a compass pointing at south. That bar, I said, it's not here. Hotel Gilchrist, Tessa said. Room keys tuck into the napkins if you ask the bartender right. Our shoulders were closer than courtesy, but courtesy felt like the wrong religion now. I could smell the citrus of her shampoo, the bite and surrender of it. It warmed the edges of my anger into something human-sized. I'm not proud of my bookkeeping, Tessa said, but when love starts evaporating, I measure the waterline. We didn't kiss. That would have turned this into a different story too soon. We stood in a silence that wasn't empty. It was the kind they build cathedrals around. The bulb hummed. Somewhere on the other side of the wall, somebody laughed the way people do when they're trying on other lives. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I don't know, I said. Part of me wants to pull the fire alarm and let the sprinklers tell the truth. Dramatic, she said, and it would ruin 3 paintings and a donor's hair. She slid her phone back into her pocket and pressed her back against the cool metal of a flat file. There's an opening at the Gilchrist tomorrow, she added, almost clinically. Matteo booked a suite for meetings. I wasn't supposed to know. She looked at me as if deciding whether I could be trusted with oxygen. Do you want to go? I asked, or do you want me to go? Her laugh was soft and wry. I want to remember I'm not crazy, she said, and I want him to see that I saw, but I don't want a scene. I want a mirror. The suite had the kind of carpet that makes you walk more carefully. The sun was working on its late afternoon audition, and the city was acquiescing. Tessa and I sat in the bar downstairs first, nursing seltzers like they were commitments. She wore a simple black blouse with a neckline that did something excellent to the idea of restraint. I wore a jacket Lena bought me last Christmas and tried not to think about how fabric carries memory even when people refuse to. We agreed on rules the way you do when you're about to step into a room you aren't sure belongs to you. We would knock. We would let whatever we saw happen without our hands on it. We would not become the thing we were protesting. It all sounded rational in the civilized hum of the bar. We believed ourselves the way you believe the weather app when the sky is already different. Upstairs, the hallway had the careful quiet of money. At the door, Tessa didn't hesitate. She knocked with 3 small, decisive beats. When it opened, the air that spilled out smelled like room service fries and a perfume I'd known for exactly 8 hours and already couldn't forget. Matteo stood there, tie loosened, shirt unbuttoned 1 step below professional. Behind him, Lena's laugh moved through the room like a silk scarf deciding whether to fall. For a second, nobody spoke. 4 people arranged around a doorway, a primitive scene. You could hang it in a museum and call it Arrivals. Tessa broke the frame by lifting her camera to her eye. The old, friendly click happened before Matteo could step forward. She didn't photograph their faces. She photographed their hands and the space between them, the table and the 2 glasses, the ring left on the nightstand as if metal needed to breathe. "I won't ask you to explain," Tessa said, conversational in a way that made my heart ache with admiration. "I just want you to see yourselves as you were when you thought you were beautiful." Matteo reached for her wrist, then thought better. I went to him as I would go to anything fragile in my shop, slow, with my palms open. "I loved her first," I said, "and that's not a claim, just a fact. You can have the art of delusion, Matteo, keep it, but leave me the clean edges." Lena stepped forward, shoulders squared the way women are taught to square them when they're about to be judged for standing. She looked at me. In that look I saw the woman who cried during an Apple commercial, who gets dizzy at high balconies, who once painted the inside of our closet a cheerful yellow because she wanted our clothes to be happier. Then I saw the woman who left her ring on a nightstand to save the skin of a moment. "I'm sorry," she said, and it sounded like the first line of an aria that had too many verses. It started as a conversation. I felt seen, and then I kept wanting to be seen that way. I told myself it didn't cancel us out. "Being seen is free," I said, "because I am not a poet, but I know what costs. What you did was not." I didn't shout. I stood in a room where I'd never been and recognized the furniture of an ending. Tessa lowered her camera like setting down a drink you no longer want. She reached for the door handle. Matteo stepped aside, and for once looked like a man rather than a brand. The elevator ride down took a year, then a moment. Tessa and I didn't touch, but my hand ached with the memory of where it could. "You were gentle," she said in the lobby, a compliment that felt more adult than any I'd received in months. "I wanted to be kind to the version of myself that might still be in that room," I said. Outside, evening had unbuttoned a few stars over the river. We walked without deciding to. The breeze lifted the little hairs at the nape of her neck, and I had to make a decision about who I was. At the railing, the city made its argument for staying. Lights arranged like possibilities, water pretending it could carry anything. Tessa turned to me and placed her palm flat on my chest, not pressing, just locating. I covered her hand with mine. My heart, traitorous and loyal, answered to both of us. "I'm not ready to be anyone's next," she said, and there was iron in the silk of it. "I'm not asking," I said, "but I want to remember this is what kindness feels like." She rose onto her toes, and when our mouths met it was slow and careful. A kiss you could show the National Weather Service and they'd call it atmospheric. Her lips tasted faintly of lime. I had the ridiculous, precise thought that this was the first time in a long time that my body had been given a choice rather than an instruction. We broke apart with the withhold of good sense. We didn't apologize for the kiss because apologies are for harm, not for hope. I moved out 2 weeks later. Lena cried, and I believed her tears were real, which did not make them binding. We divided our books and our cookware and the plants we could keep alive. She kept the pothos. I took the olive green casserole dish that never loved us back. I slept in a small sublet that smelled like someone else's stories and learned to cook for one without setting a table for two. Tessa and I became people who text photographs. A collapsed umbrella on a sunny day, a dog napping in a bookstore window, a crooked shelf she wanted me to come fix just so she could watch my hands. We met for coffee in places with too much daylight and put our knees almost touching beneath tables. When we kissed, it was always with the respect you give old things. Careful, attentive, aware of the work time has already done. Lena wrote me an email titled, "We were not a mistake," and I agreed. We were. We were a house that held until it didn't. I sent back a note without accusation, just the list of small, ordinary beauties I'd keep. The candle she lit inside a carved orange at Christmas, the time she pressed a leaf between pages of a cookbook because it was too beautiful to throw away, the hours we spent deciding on a couch like it meant something, and how for a while it did. Spring pushed its shoulder into the room. On a Thursday, Tessa asked me to meet her on the pedestrian bridge over the river at sunset. She wore a dress with pockets and the kind of grin that owns the future. In her hand was a small, square package tied with bakery string. "Open it," she said. Inside was a photograph on thick paper, the edges deckled like a deck of cards you trust to tell your fortune. It was the picture she'd taken at the hotel doorway. Not of faces, not of shame, just 4 feet, the edge of a carpet, the corner of a door. In the foreground, a reflection bloomed in the lacquer of a side table, a crescent of my jaw, the suggestion of her shoulder. We were together in the reflection, even while everything else was separate. "I printed it because I like the way the light tells on us," she said, "and because reflections only lie when you stand too far away." I slid the photo back into its sleeve and tucked it inside my jacket near my heart. The sun leaned on the water and the water pretended not to notice. Tessa reached for me and I went, and the kiss we shared was not an argument and not an alibi. It was a beginning, quiet and sure, the kind you can build tables on. A month later, I walked past the Harbor Muse with a package of oak samples under my arm. Through the window, a new exhibit was being hung, lines, angles, shadows making themselves reliable. I glanced at my reflection in the glass and saw a man I recognized. A man who still believes in steady joints, in grain that holds, in hands that learn. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Tessa again, a photo she'd snapped of 2 bar stools side by side and the caption, "Tonight, no hotel, just oxygen." I wrote back, "Bring that perfume that smells like decisions." And she sent me a laughing face and a heart that looked less like a cartoon and more like an organ. I used to think a story about infidelity had to end with ruins. Now I know it can end with architecture, angles that meet where they're supposed to, a room with light from 2 directions, a table that remembers every meal and still asks for another. I still believe in mirrors. The trick is to stand close enough. And when the ring reflects another man, not to smash the glass, but to step forward until you recognize the person looking back.